Come spend an afternoon in the kitchen with me as I prepare a wholesome homemade dinner for my family of 6. Today's menu is simple, nourishing, and packed with flavor: grilled lamb chops, homemade hummus, roasted sweet potatoes, and a green bean side dish. There's something so satisfying about bringing together a nourishing meal from scratch, and I'll be sharing the entire process with you. So grab a cup of coffee, settle in, and let's spend a productive afternoon in the kitchen. What I have here are dried chickpeas that I've soaked and sprouted. I started this process about 2 days ago. I prefer using dried beans instead of canned whenever possible. At a minimum, I'll soak them for about a day, but when I have a little extra time, I like to let them sprout. Sprouting helps improve digestibility and can make some of the nutrients more available. They are ready, and I'm going to pressure cook them until they are nice and tender. Now I'm moving on to the marinade for the lamb. We're having this for dinner tonight, but I still like to give the meat as much time to marinate as possible. I'm starting with some homemade yogurt. This is just plain yogurt, not Greek. Then I'm adding coriander powder and my homemade spice blend, which is made with cinnamon, cloves, cardamom, and fennel seeds. It's incredibly flavorful and works beautifully in all kinds of meat dishes. A little goes a long way. Next, I'm adding cumin powder, turmeric, and plenty of fresh lime juice. The lime really helps bring all of these flavors together, so I like to be generous with it. Since I'm cooking this later today, I'll use the full amount of lime juice and also add some salt. If I were marinating the lamb overnight, I would have used only half as much lime juice. I have this beautiful Australian rack of lamb, and it's a double rack. The first thing I'm going to do is trim off some of the excess fat. The fat becomes incredibly flavorful once it's grilled with all those spices and the yogurt, but I like to remove about half of it. Next, I'll separate the rack into individual chops. It helps to have a sharp knife for this. Just follow the bone with the knife, keeping it flexible as you cut around it. These chops are relatively thin, which is perfect because the marinade can really penetrate the meat even when you don't have a lot of time to marinate. And trust me when I say this, everyone in my family loves these lamb chops. My kids will happily sit down and finish their entire serving without any complaints and ask for more. I've mentioned this in a previous video, but whenever I go to Costco, I like to stock up. They make such an easy dinner, yet they look and taste like something that took hours of effort to prepare. Now I'll do the same thing with the second rack. Lately, as my kids have been growing and their appetites have grown right along with them, I've noticed that 2 racks are barely enough for our family. We may be at a point where I need to start cooking 3 racks instead of 2, but for tonight's dinner, these 2 racks will have to do. Before moving on, I'll do a quick cleanup. Whenever I have the time, I like to clean as I go. It makes the kitchen feel a lot less overwhelming. But of course, on busy weekdays after work, that's not always realistic. Sometimes the dishes do pile up. But on a slower weekend day like today, I don't mind taking a few extra minutes to wash things up and reset the kitchen before moving on to the next step. Next step obviously is to marinate the lamb. I thought I'd use a spoon for this part, but it just was not doing a good enough job of mixing everything together. So I switched to using my hands, which is honestly the best way to make sure every piece is evenly coated. I really want all sides of the lamb chops covered in this flavorful marinade so that every bite is packed with flavor. Once everything is well coated, I'll transfer the lamb to the refrigerator and let it marinate until later today. About an hour before grilling, I'll take it out and let it come closer to room temperature for more even cooking. Now I'm moving on to the green bean side dish, and for this recipe I'm going to need a lot of garlic. I love the flavor that garlic adds, and it's one of those ingredients I use generously whenever I can. For today's recipe, I'm using 2 whole heads of garlic. First, I'll separate and peel all of it and then I'll slice them thinly. It may seem like a lot of garlic, and it is, but once it is cooked, the flavor adds so much depth to the dish. And did you know that once you chop or crush garlic, if you let it sit out for about 10 to 15 minutes before cooking, it allows an enzyme reaction to happen that helps develop more of its beneficial compounds. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but whenever I can, I like to prep my garlic first and just let it rest on the cutting board for a few minutes before it goes into the pan. It's a small step, but I try to do it whenever I remember. For this green bean dish, I'm actually using frozen beans today. This is a recipe everybody in my family loves, and I realized I missed recording the very beginning of it. So, what I already did was heat some oil in the skillet, saute the garlic for a couple of minutes, and then add the frozen green beans. After that, I poured in a little chicken broth to help everything cook down. So, what you're seeing now is me mixing everything together. When the beans are still frozen, it can be a little hard to stir, so I'm just letting them cook down for a few minutes so they soften and make more space in the skillet. Then I'll go ahead and add the rest of the bag. These will need a bit of time to cook, so I don't need to keep mixing everything constantly right now. I'll stir it as much as I can, then cover the skillet with a lid and let it simmer and cook through. This is one of those easy steps where you can just let the heat do its work while you move on to the next part of dinner. And the next part of dinner is this big green leafy salad that I'm about to put together. When I plan a meal, I usually think of protein first. Then I build in as many vegetables as I can, and I finally add some kind of carbohydrate to round it out. So for today's dinner, I'm actually focusing on 2 vegetable dishes along with everything else. This green salad is going to be the main fresh component on the plate tonight, and I already know my kids are going to want the green beans too. They absolutely love that recipe. I'm also planning for leftovers. In fact, I expect at least half of the green beans will carry over, which is perfect because it gives us an easy lunch for tomorrow. My general rule when cooking is if I'm ever in doubt, I cook a little more. In my experience, it never goes to waste. We usually end up finishing it within a day anyway. I have a simple dressing made from red wine vinegar and extra virgin olive oil. I mix those well before adding the greens. For the base of the salad, I'm using a combination of arugula and spring mix. Now I'm chopping some cherry tomatoes, and I'll also be adding cucumber and feta cheese. I like to crumble the feta with my fingers. I'm not going to toss everything together just yet. If you mix the salad too early, the greens can start to wilt and lose their freshness. So I'll leave everything assembled in the bowl and give it a good toss right before we are ready to sit down for dinner. This salad pairs beautifully with the grilled lamb chops and adds a nice contrast to all those warm dishes on the table tonight. I'm taking a quick peek at the green beans to see how they're coming along. They're looking good, but they still need little more time to cook. The garlic is softening nicely and the beans are starting to absorb all that flavor from the broth. I'll put the lid back on and let them continue cooking until they are tender and exactly where I want them to be. Next, I'm going to make roasted sweet potatoes. This is one of the easiest side dishes because the oven does most of the work. Who doesn't love that? I'll start by washing and scrubbing the sweet potatoes, then cutting them into small cubes. My oldest son absolutely loves sweet potatoes. He will even eat them as a snack, so I always have a bag of them in my pantry. Once everything is cubed, I'll drizzle the sweet potatoes with a little avocado oil and season them with salt. Then I'll toss everything together to make sure the pieces are evenly coated. I already have the oven preheated to 425 degrees, so once they are ready, they'll go straight in. They usually take about 25 to 30 minutes. If any of you were wondering what happened to those chickpeas from the beginning of the video, here they are. They came out of the Instant Pot a while ago and they are perfectly cooked. I let them sit on the counter for a while to cool down because we are about to turn them into hummus. Since my food processor is plastic, I prefer not to add hot chickpeas directly into it. I usually wait until they are closer to room temperature before blending. The chickpeas go into the food processor, then I add plenty of freshly squeezed lime juice. Just like with the lamb marinade, the lime juice really helps bring all the flavors together. Next goes in some tahini. I found this one on Amazon and I really like it, along with extra virgin olive oil and salt. While the food processor is running, I'll drizzle in a little water. I don't usually measure it, I just add enough until the hummus reaches the consistency I'm looking for. Or I also add extra virgin olive oil. Once it's silky smooth, I give it a taste and adjust if needed. And that's it. Homemade hummus is surprisingly easy to make and it tastes so much better than store bought. Now it's time to cook the lamb chops. Finally, I'm heating up my cast iron, which is probably one of my favorite pieces of cookware in the kitchen. I use it for everything, for steaks, grilled chicken, lamb chops, pancakes, and even toasting bread. It gets used almost every day, multiple times. Once it's nice and hot, I'll drizzle some oil and start placing the lamb chops one by one. I've made this recipe many times, so I know that all of these chops will fit on this griddle. It just takes a little planning. It's almost like a game of Tetris. I have to arrange them just right so every piece has enough contact with the surface. I've gotten pretty efficient at using every bit of space. With other pans, crowding the meat like this would cause it to steam instead of sear, but cast iron is different. As long as it's properly preheated and the heat stays high, it can handle a full batch without any problems. Another thing I've learned is that my griddle has a few spots hotter than the others, which is not ideal. So I pay attention to where the heat is the strongest and just rotate the lamb chops accordingly. I'll turn them a couple of times and move them around as needed to make sure everything cooks evenly. You could also finish these in the oven, especially since the sweet potatoes are already roasting in there. But honestly, I love the flavor that cast iron gives to grilled meat, so I prefer to cook them entirely on the stove top. This isn't really a step you can walk away from. With all of that yogurt and the spices, the lamb needs a little attention to make sure nothing burns. But for me, it's completely worth it. The finished lamb chops are always one of the highlights of the meal.